Welcome to Talk Purpose and Truth with Eden and Kim, shifting you into higher consciousness, the show that elevates, uplifts, and encourages listeners to grow, heal, awaken, and evolve. Eden and Kim include bold topics, special interviews with inspiring guests, intuitive readings, channeled messages from beyond, including celebrities, hot topics to expand your awareness, and time for questions from the audience. Tune in for unprecedented truth, authenticity, on-purpose discussions, and magical moments.
On retreat, that just became the all-consuming focus of my life. I started getting master's and doctorate degrees just to learn more about spirit and counseling and psychology, because I think it's important that we don't do a spiritual bypass, that we're well-rounded and we address all levels of consciousness. And I started facilitating spiritual seminars again about 20 years ago. I started a class called Soul Dance, which which ran for monthly in Los Angeles and Santa Monica for 19 years up until COVID, and then facilitated spiritual seminars, and then have facilitated a few hundred spiritual seminars, some co-facilitated, and then more recently solo.
That's awesome. Yeah.
And I also have a private practice, which I've also been doing for many years.
Yeah, right. And I've heard lots of good things about you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. And recently I saw a video on Instagram that you posted about your parents who recently passed away very close to each other. If I'm not, okay, so I'm correct on that. Can you talk about what happened when they passed away? Because I think you have an amazing experience with that. And are you still in communication with them now?
Sure. Yes, I can talk about it. And yes, I just had a beautiful experience actually with my father this morning. So yes, I am in communication with them. And so what I heard you ask is what was that experience like, helping them transition, and where did they go? Is that kind of the question?
Where did they go? That's the really interesting part. Yes.
That's the really interesting part. Okay. So my father passed both unexpectedly, completely unexpectedly, both my parents. My father passed in June 14th. And then, and I was with him when I got on an airplane as soon as I knew, and was with him, helped him to transition, did all kinds of spiritual work with him. And he was unconscious for much of it. So, but, right before he passed, he'd been unconscious for many, many hours, and, they were expecting to go any second. And all of a sudden, and I put my hands on him and I started speaking to him in the angelic language, and he opened his eyes and said, "I love you," and then closed his eyes. And I know, and I said, of course, I said, "I love you, Dad." And the nurse jumped up, ran over and said, "Oh my God, did you hear that?" He said, "I love you," because he hadn't spoken for hours and hours and hours. I mean, we were expecting him to take his last breath at that point. And so that was really beautiful for me, of course. And my dad was a brilliant man. And when he passed, he took his last breath. And of course, I allowed myself to sob, because, we are multidimensional. And if we don't allow the feelings, right, that wholeness, that empathy, then they just come out sideways later. So, and then I followed him where he went, and I experienced him go into the halls of rest. So the halls of rest, so we have these bodies and these, these individuations. The halls of rest are really a place where of course passing, for the person who's passing, is ecstatic. We all know that from reading near-death experiences and our own out-of-body travel. And the halls of rest are really where, in my experience, people go to get used to not having a body, get used to being communicated to from within themselves. Get used to, being one with the allness of spirit. And so I experienced him there in the halls of rest for a while. And then I would go in and visit, as often as I could, because of course, I need to live here. And so we had to be very sensitive as to how much we interface with those who have passed. And then so it was just a few days later that I got the call that my mother was on hospice. completely unexpected. My mother had no reason to be passing. No, in fact, yeah, they still don't really know why she passed. I do. I believe I do. So they were divorced 53 years ago. And, but I always believed, and not just, I don't think it was just a romantic notion, that they were still the loves of each other's lives. And of course, I asked my mother, who wasn't really, she went like down like that right after Dad passed. And she was put on hospice. I got on a plane again, still grieving my dad, still wearing my dad's shirts, and still, processing that. It was very multidimensional. I would go with him and be ecstatic in spirit, and then be his daughter. And this was just a few days after he passed, mind you. And so I got on the plane again and went to be with my mother. And I asked inside, why would they be passing so quickly? And what I heard is they needed to complete on the other side what they did not complete here.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
They needed to complete the karma because they were going to go to different places once they passed, because they were at different states of evolution. And so my mom needed to catch my dad before he moved to a different place. And so I walked in with my mom, and I was very close to my mom, very, very close to my mom. And I walked in, and she was already doing the death rattle, where that sound that comes from the throat. And I'm like, oh my God, I know what this is. I just experienced with my dad. And the hospice worker said, yes, I'm sorry. I think it's going to be any moment. And I'm reeling, and I put my hands on her, and I just started praying over her. I sent out, this is the beautiful part of social media. I sent out messages on social media, please pray for my mother. And somebody made a calendar, and people started signing up and praying for her around the clock. There was not one space empty. And I've done service for 3 decades now for many people. Soul dance, I never took money for, and that, thousands of people did it. And so people were so generous in giving back to me. And my mom, I was there a couple of hours after I arrived, and they were expecting this would be her last breath. She opened her eyes. She said, hi, babe.
Wow.
And long story short, she lived for 3 more weeks.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And every day they're like, well, she's going to go. Oops, just kidding. She's not, and I did prayer communion with her. I just did all kinds of spiritual work, spoke to her. I told her about her archangelic heritage, and she got it. When people are that close to passing, they tend to be kind of like a 5 to 10-year-old. So I don't really think she knew that she was dying. But I told her about her heritage, and she was like, oh my gosh, really, me? Why? And we started talking about it, and people would come over and do prayer communion with her. She's in North Carolina, but there are ministers there. And then they say that people sometimes are waiting for someone, and my brother had not been there, and I basically had to go get my brother, sit on him and pull. It's a complicated story. Anyway, he came over. We thought for sure she's going to go now that he's said goodbye, but she didn't. And then I just, I got the whole family together, and we sang to her, and then I suddenly had the thought that I think she's hanging on, because at this point she's totally unconscious. I think she's hanging on because I'm here doing all this work with her, and and I went in and I made her room beautiful with fresh flowers and candles and constant chants and music, so I said I'm going to make a plane reservation. So I made a reservation, and I was going to leave on a Wednesday at 5, and Wednesday at so I got there later because she was because I was packing and everything, right? I've been there for 3 weeks. And I got there and at 10 a.m. and my stepfather said, I think it's going to be really soon. I think she moved her foot at 6. So I ran in, and there was my mother's about 8-hour-old corpse. And it was, of course, shocking to me, because if you've seen a corpse, there's no mistaking that there's no life there. And I helped clean her and anointed her body and thanked every part of it, and helped load her onto the hearse. And I went and sat under her magnolia tree, and I didn't want to watch the hearse drive away. It should have gone to the right, so I went to the left, and the hearse turned and went to the left. So clearly I was supposed to see it drive off. And of course, again, I allowed the grieving, and then I followed her in spirit. And it was ecstatic, where it was, it's fascinating because literally I was sobbing, and then seconds later I was in ecstasy because I experienced, she said, what you call life is such an infinitesimal part of existence. And it's ecstatic. And I traveled with her into this whole experience of just being one with all that is, which is what we truly are. And it was the most, it was just so beyond doubt and just blissful. And then she, experienced her going into the halls of rest as well, and then but I didn't experience her staying there all that long.
Can you explain what the halls of rest are?
Sure. The halls of rest, I think it's a kind of a poetic term, but it's where we, in my experience, it's where we go. And it's like sort of I'm not making this up. It's sort of known in spiritual circles. It's that, although it may be called different things. Some people might call it heaven, or sort of heaven's gate, where we go into this place. It's like a resting place to get used to not having individuation. You think of it, it'd kind of be terrifying if it was just like that, where I'm me and I have this cognizance and this identity, and all of a sudden I'm nothing. So it's a gentle transition where one goes as their soul and just starts to get used to not having a body. They haven't really started to harvest their learnings or go where they're going next, but they're just resting in the arms of God, very consciously.
And is there like a timeline when how long they stay there?
Well, that it depends on the evolution of the soul. Some people are so evolved they don't even go to the halls of rest. They may go. A dear friend of mine passed away about a week ago. Very conscious. He chose medical assistance, and he was very conscious of the whole experience. And what I was told is that he went straight into the soul realm. He bypassed the halls of rest. So
Wow.
It depends on one's level of. But this is a man who was 85 or something and had been, devoutly of service and lots of spiritual study, was a minister, an initiate in the sound current tradition, and that kind of thing. And so I've been touching in with my parents when I'm allowed, and this morning my father, I experienced him. My father's a brilliant guy. He graduated from med school when he was 16 and came here from India, hence my name Das, like Ram Das, although I was born with the name. I experienced him in the mental level, which didn't surprise me, but like connecting into the mind of God more, and I actually took him traveling with me, and he was like, "Wow, this is amazing." And I said, "Well, I think if you do anything 100%, that's God. Like if you do this mental level, not mental like we're thinking, but the higher level of the mental plane." That then Einstein is famous for saying, I want to know the mind of God. Right? So, and I said, I missed you. And he said, well, I'm right here. I said, I know, but I miss you. And I said, well, I see you again. He said, yes, when you pass. And I just started weeping because it was so real to me.
Wow, that's profound and powerful. And I think for a lot of people, it's so reassuring and comforting to know. I think that some people still question and doubt or are confused by all of this. And so to have answers in this way is so beautiful and helps people get to that place of realizing that we are all one, and not putting so much importance on things that are really actually very shallow or low vibration. How do you feel that, or how do you help people know how to communicate with angels, and how can angels help people?
Well, again, I've been doing this for decades, and so it's been so profound to just witness hundreds of people who are like, well, I don't know about angels. It's like, no, this is not about working with angels. Like, I don't recommend working with angels. You know, people are like, huh, you're the angel lady. I'm like, yeah, great. Yeah. My dad would have loved that. That would have sounded like the cat lady or something, you know. But no, I recommend working only with the very, very high, pristine, great archangels. And in my experience, what those are, they are like, in my experience, there's what Googleplex, you know, whatever's the biggest number of angels, and the angelic realm predated the human by many millennia, whereas this was really a latter day experiment. And so most of us have an angelic heritage. And it's not about going back there trying to squeeze into our pastel robes, you know, where our heftiest responsibility was to praise God, whom we never forgot, right? As wonderful as that sounds, it's about bringing all of that acumen here. So there's only about 30 to 50 great archangels. So very high beings, very, very high. Some of them are called the silent ones, where they're really that bridge from essence, from source, to us. Because if we connect to source directly, like really, really directly, then the jig would be up. We couldn't pretend this separation anymore. We couldn't pretend, you know, to be individuated. We wouldn't engage in this godly experience of individuation, right? We couldn't unknow what we know. But if we have these living bridges that are barely individuated, then they step down that vibration so we can experience the pure spirit even while we walk this physical plane, but with our eyes cast upwards, so that we have that divine remembrance of the angelic coupled with the co-creator, the free choice of man, right? Because angels are born in absolute surrender and remembrance, right? They know that they are God, that they know God's will. They evolve to free choice when they're an archangel, right? Because and then we are born with free choice. You know, we can bonk our baby sister on the head, we can rape and pillage, we can do whatever we want. We have free choice, right? We're created in God's image in that way. That's what I think that means, although that's a gross simplification of it. But we have free choice. We evolve to angelic divine remembrance. I am God. I surrender all of me to God and to God's will. So we evolve to where angels are born, and angels evolve to where we're born. So we work with the high archangelic. What it does is it brings us into that divine remembrance of our own volition. So now we're co-creating like an angel co-creates, surrendered, right, in touch with spirit, but still with that beautiful free choice and that co-creatorship of the human.
Wow. So you and I talked a little bit offline about you doing a little bit of channeling for us. Would you mind doing that now?
Sure, of course.
Okay.
And tell me what you
explained it. What?
Do you want me to just channel a message? Do you want me to work with one of you? Tell me a little bit more what you'd like.
So I think we could do individual little quickie messages. What do you think, Kim?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So individual messages for each of you, or yeah,
unless you're getting something for us as a group, either way.
Well, I think we would do like a little bit for each of you and then for the group. How's that sound?
Okay.
Awesome.
And we have 14 minutes. I'll have to speed dial an angel.
No rush or anything.
So so which one of you wants to go first?
Okay, I'll go.
All right, love. So tell me, Eden, is there a concern, a quandary, something you'd like a support from a spirit about?
Absolutely, yes. Do I say it out loud though?
Yes, please. And what I need to know is I also work in people's aura when I work with them. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
Okay, you'll just see my hand moving like that. That's okay.
Okay.
So you want to be vague for your confidentiality. Be as vague as you like, and spirit will know what you're.
For more information on Eden, go to edensustin.com. For more information on Kim, go to kimlifecoach.com. Make sure to follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Talk Purpose and Truth Podcast. If you loved this episode, you'll love every episode. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you for listening.